My mother tapped her glass in the middle of Thanksgiving dinner, her voice bright and cutting as she announced, "Mia's wedding was absolutely perfect. So, Harper, when will it be your turn?" The room leaned in, waiting for me to shrink like I usually did. Instead, I said calmly, "I already had mine." The table froze. My dad insisted that wasn't possible, and Mia stared down at her plate, shoulders tight. No one else knew the truth, yet. I grew up being told I was the independent one, the child who didn't need much attention, the kid who just figured things out. At least, that's how my mother phrased it whenever someone asked why Mia got all the privileges while I seemed to orbit on the outside. Mia was the princess of the house, fragile, special, deserving. I was the helper, the buffer, the one expected to stay quiet so she could shine. I remember wanting to join the school dance team in 5th grade. I'd practiced for weeks, staying up late in my room, copying routines from old YouTube videos. But when the registration fee came up, my mom said they didn't think I'd enjoy it anyway, and that we couldn't afford extracurriculars for both kids. 2 weeks later, Mia waltzed into the living room wearing a brand new custom dance uniform, Mom beaming as she took photos. Birthdays weren't much different. Mine always seemed to fall on the same weekend as Mia's recitals or competitions. My cake, if there was one, was cut in a rush between events, often with someone saying, "We'll celebrate properly later." We never did. Meanwhile, when Mia's birthday rolled around, the entire family turned into her personal event planning committee. Even my accomplishments felt invisible. When I brought home straight A's, my parents barely glanced at the report card. But when Mia got a B+ in a class she barely passed, everyone celebrated her hard work. I learned early that being good at something only mattered if it didn't overshadow her. As we got older, the divide only grew more obvious. Mia went to a private arts college and blew through her first-year tuition after switching majors twice. My parents didn't have the money to cover the mess she'd made, so they approached me. Not with honesty, but with guilt. "You're the responsible one, Harper," my mom said. "Mia just needs a little support right now." I used the savings from my part-time jobs to cover what she lacked because that was what I had been taught to do, sacrifice so Mia didn't have to. When I landed an interview for a design internship I'd dreamed of, Mia suddenly needed to be driven to a last-minute casting 2 hours away. My mother insisted, "You can reschedule. Her opportunities are harder to come by." I skipped my interview to get Mia there. She didn't even thank me. I spent so much of my early adulthood living in Mia's shadow that I didn't realize how suffocating it was until I met Noah. He saw me, not the version my parents curated, not the invisible sister. His family treated me with more warmth in a month than my own had in years. They listened when I spoke. They cared how I felt. They didn't make me earn their love. When Noah and I got engaged, I wanted to include my family despite everything. I sent out 4 wedding invitations with signature-required delivery. I watched the tracking updates like a child waiting for Santa, every envelope signed for, every invitation confirmed received. And then, nothing. No call. No congratulations. No acknowledgement that the invitations existed at all. At first, I tried to rationalize it. Maybe they were busy. Maybe Mia had another crisis. Maybe my mom had overlooked the mail. But deep down, I knew it wasn't an accident. I knew the silence was intentional. So Noah and I moved forward with our small ceremony, just as family, a few close friends, and a simple, perfect outdoor venue surrounded by autumn leaves. I wore a dress my mother never saw, walked down an aisle she never stood beside, and said vows she never heard. It was the happiest day of my life. And at the same time, it confirmed something I'd been trying to deny for years: my family hadn't forgotten my wedding. They had chosen not to see it. And that choice was going to unravel everything at Thanksgiving. When I finally worked up the nerve to ask my mother about the wedding invitations, I did it gently, almost timidly, like a child wanting permission to speak. We were alone in her kitchen a week before Thanksgiving, and I said, "Mom, did you ever get my wedding invite?" Diana didn't even look up from slicing pie crust. "You must be remembering wrong," she said calmly, as if gaslighting me was just part of normal conversation. "I'm not remembering wrong," I said. "It was signature required." She sighed dramatically, the kind of sigh meant to make me feel like the unreasonable one. "Then the delivery service must have messed up. You know how unreliable those things are." I stood there in silence, her words hitting with that familiar sting. When I didn't respond, she added, "Harper, don't be so sensitive. Not everything is an attack." That sentence used to shut me down instantly. This time, it didn't. At a small family gathering later that day, I tried again. I mentioned the wedding to an aunt, hoping she might somehow reveal the truth. Instead, she frowned and said, "Honey, not everything revolves around you. You're married now, act like it." Another cousin chimed in, "Why bring up old stuff? Focus on Mia's big day. You don't want to steal her thunder again." Again. As if my existence alone was a crime of overshadowing Mia. That was how they all thought. The more they brushed me off, the more something inside me tightened. Something sharp. Something awakening. I told Jenna at work what was happening. She listened, really listened, and then asked, "Do you still have the delivery confirmation?" I did. I forwarded her the tracking information and within an hour, she messaged back, "Harper, the delivery signatures match your sister's name. And the notification email from your wedding registry? It was opened from your parents' home IP address." I stared at the screen, my hands trembling. It wasn't just silence, it was deliberate erasure. And then came the moment that cemented everything. A few days before Thanksgiving, I stopped by my parents' house to drop off a dessert Noah had made. Mia was in the living room with one of her friends, giggling. I wasn't trying to snoop, but when I walked past, I caught sight of what she was holding, a small stack of envelopes. On top was my wedding invitation. She was showing her friend the gold-embossed lettering, laughing softly as if it were some kind of inside joke. When she saw me, she stuffed the envelopes into her tote bag so fast she nearly dropped them. My throat went dry. "You kept it?" I asked. Her face flushed. "It's not what you think." I didn't push. I didn't yell. I didn't even ask her why. I just stood there, staring at the bag she clutched like contraband. Her friend stared between us before excusing herself awkwardly. Mia whispered, "You shouldn't dig into things that aren't a big deal." Not a big deal. My wedding. My vows. My life. Thanksgiving arrived like a storm I could feel in my chest. Noah came with me, more out of support than any hope this night would go well. When we walked in, the room was already buzzing. The table was beautifully set, everyone laughing and talking, everyone except me. During dinner, I could feel it building. My mother kept glancing at me like she was waiting for the right moment. And when she finally tapped her glass, I knew this was the performance she'd been rehearsing. Her voice rang through the dining room. Mia's wedding was absolutely breathtaking. We're all so proud. Now, Harper, she smiled sweetly, the kind of sweetness that cuts. When's your turn? When will we finally get to celebrate you? There it was. The setup. The trap. They wanted me to admit I hadn't grown up, hadn't moved on, hadn't achieved what my younger sister had. They wanted to reaffirm the hierarchy. But they didn't know I had already married the man I loved. They didn't know I had proof of everything they did. They didn't know I wasn't going to play my role anymore. I looked straight at her and said, I already had my wedding. The entire table fell silent, forks midair, conversations dying mid-sentence. Patrick shook his head, confused. That's ridiculous. We never got an invitation. Mia stared at her lap, shoulders trembling, not from sadness, but from exposure. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't the one shrinking. I was the one watching the facade begin to crack. After Thanksgiving, the silence in my parents' house clung to me like smoke. I went home feeling hollow, confused, and strangely calm, like my brain hadn't caught up to the emotional impact yet. The next morning at work, Jenna took one look at me and dragged me into an empty conference room. I told her everything, the question at the table, the way everyone froze, the guilt creeping back up my spine. She listened without interrupting, then said one sentence that landed harder than any argument my family had ever thrown at me. Harper, they didn't miss your wedding. They chose not to see it. It wasn't cruel. It was true. And the truth always hits differently when spoken out loud. That evening, Noah's parents invited us over for dinner. I hadn't realized how tense I was until his mom hugged me, tight and warm, as if I actually mattered. They didn't ask why my family wasn't present at the ceremony. They didn't make excuses for them. They just said, "We're glad you're part of our family." I cried in their hallway, quietly, embarrassed, but unable to stop. Noah squeezed my hand and told me something I didn't know I needed to hear: you deserve people who show up for you. That night, I went home and pulled out the delivery confirmations again. I studied them with a level of focus I normally reserved for client projects. The signatures were unmistakable. Every single envelope had been signed for by Mia Lane. Not even an attempt to disguise the name. Tracking numbers don't lie. My breath caught in my chest, but I needed more. So I logged into the analytics for our electronic wedding announcement, the email version we sent out as a backup. I shouldn't have been surprised when I saw it. The email had been opened from my parents' home IP address. Not once, but twice. And then deleted. All of it was deliberate. Every layer, every silence, every excuse. I sat there, remembering the countless times my family had told me not to overshadow Mia. The Christmas I was asked not to bring my new camera because it made Mia feel inadequate. The graduation ceremony where Mom begged me not to smile too wide in photos. The night I got promoted and was told not to mention it at dinner because today is Mia's day. My entire life had been curated to keep Mia comfortable. And my wedding, the one moment in my life where I had chosen myself, was just another threat to her spotlight. The clarity didn't come as a dramatic moment. It came quietly, like a lens finally snapping into focus. I realized I hadn't lost my family at Thanksgiving. I hadn't been abandoned at all. The truth was much simpler. I had stopped pretending I ever truly had a family to begin with. The distance I felt wasn't grief, it was freedom. I wasn't mourning them. I was mourning the version of them I had tried to believe in for years. And once that illusion shattered, what remained wasn't love or loyalty. It was just the truth. And for the first time, I was ready to face it head-on. I didn't plan on confronting them that night. But once the truth settled in my bones, once the ache turned into clarity, I knew I couldn't keep letting everyone pretend nothing happened. So the Sunday after Thanksgiving, I walked back into my parents' house, not as the daughter desperate for approval, but as someone finally done begging. They were all there already. Diana on the sofa, legs crossed, arms folded like a judge preparing to pass sentence. Patrick reading the newspaper, avoiding eye contact. Mia perched beside our mother, looking small and fragile in the way she always did when she wanted protection. The moment I stepped in, Diana said, "Harper, if you came to apologize for your behavior at Thanksgiving, let's just talk it through and move on. That sentence almost made me laugh. Instead, I sat down, pulled out my phone, and said, "Actually, I came to show you something." I opened the first video, the one Noah recorded at our wedding. The music, the vows, the moment I walked down the aisle. I turned the volume up so everyone in the room could hear the applause, the joy, the love they chose to ignore. Diana gasped softly. Patrick lowered his paper. Mia stared at her lap. "This happened," I said quietly. "You were invited to this." Diana straightened up. "Harper, we never got any." I cut her off and opened the delivery confirmations. 4 signatures. All in the same handwriting. Each envelope was signed for by the same person. I turned the screen toward them. Mia Lane. Patrick blinked, confused. "There must be a mistake." "There's no mistake," I said, swiping to the next screen. "Here's the email record from the digital invitations. They were opened from this house. And then deleted." Silence. Thick, crushing silence. Every piece of evidence pointed to the golden child they raised so carefully, the one they always protected, the one who could do no wrong. Mia's shoulders trembled. Diana reacted first. "I'm sure Mia only did it because she didn't want confusion. Her wedding was coming up, and—" "Mom," I said sharply, "stop making excuses. This wasn't confusion. It was sabotage." Patrick finally spoke. "Harper, don't turn this into a scene. Weddings bring stress. Let's not make things bigger than they need to be." There it was, the lifetime dismissal, the pattern that raised me. But this time, I wasn't swallowing it. I turned to Mia. "Why?" She broke. Tears spilled instantly, dramatic, practiced, the kind designed to trigger sympathy. But this time, I wasn't moved. Her voice cracked. "Because you always make everything look easy. You always succeed. People like you without you trying. And whenever you're around, I feel invisible." Invisible. The irony nearly choked me. She continued, "My wedding was supposed to be my moment. If people saw yours first, no one would care about mine." Diana wrapped an arm around her, glaring at me. "See what you've done? She's hurting. You should have been more considerate." I felt something inside me inhale deeply and then settle, like a storm finally deciding to clear. I stood up slowly, letting the weight of everything sink in. "I didn't lose anyone tonight," I said calmly. "I just finally understand who has never actually stood with me." Diana protested immediately. "Harper, don't be dramatic. We can move past this." Patrick tried to soften it. "We're still family, sweetheart." And Mia, still crying, whispered, "I didn't mean for it to get this bad. Please don't leave like this." But their words felt like wallpaper, pretty enough from a distance, meaningless up close. I picked up my bag, looked at each of them, and said, "I'm not punishing you. I'm just choosing myself." Diana stood to reach for me, but I stepped back. "No more apologies you don't mean. No more pretending this family isn't built on favoritism and lies." Then I turned toward the door. No one followed. No one said my name. And for the first time in my entire life, the silence felt like freedom, not abandonment. I walked out without looking back, leaving them to the truth they created, and stepping into a life where I finally belonged to myself. Cutting ties wasn't loud or dramatic. It was a quiet decision I made the morning after the confrontation, sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee and Noah's hand wrapped around mine. I blocked Diana's number first, then Mia's. I didn't write a message or leave an explanation. They had heard everything they needed to hear, and I was done handing them more pieces of myself to misuse. For a few days, the silence was eerie, like my world had been rearranged overnight. Then, a small envelope showed up in our mailbox. I knew the handwriting instantly. It was my father's. Inside was my original wedding invitation, the one Mia had hidden, the gold embossing still perfectly intact. No apology, no explanation. Just a sticky note that read, "Found this in the house. Thought you should have it." It wasn't redemption. It wasn't accountability. But it was the closest thing Patrick had ever offered to acknowledging my hurt. I tucked the invitation into a drawer, not out of sentiment, but as a reminder of the moment I finally stopped waiting for people who never showed up. Life with Noah felt different now, lighter, softer, steadier. His family welcomed me like I had always been one of them. His mom sent me recipes, his dad asked about my work, his siblings invited me to game nights and barbecues. They didn't tiptoe around me or compare me to anyone else. They simply treated me like family. And slowly, I began to realize that this is what belonging feels like, not walking on eggshells, not dimming myself, not competing with someone else's expectations. Just being seen. In the weeks that followed, I poured myself into my marriage, my work, and the people who genuinely cared. I started saying no without guilt. I started choosing rest without apology. I started laughing more deeply, sleeping more peacefully, living more fully. One evening, sitting on the porch with Noah and watching the sunset spill across the sky, it struck me. I hadn't lost a family. I had finally stopped pretending I had one. And in the empty space they left behind, something new grew, something real, something chosen, something mine. In the end, I learned that revenge isn't always about striking back. Sometimes the real revenge is walking away whole, refusing to let someone who never valued you define your worth. Family isn't built on blood or duty, it's built on respect, trust, and the willingness to show up. And if the people who were supposed to love you chose jealousy, silence, or manipulation instead, then please hear me when I say this: you are not alone, and you never were. If any part of my story resonates with you, share it. Leave a comment so others know they aren't the only ones navigating painful family dynamics. And if you want more honest, emotional family revenge stories like this, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next one.